I don't know if I want to go back to school for right now. And he goes, well, what are you going to go to school for? And I said, well, if you be a GA, you got to be in school. And he goes, no, I'm talking about hiring you as a full-time coach. I need a receivers coach. And I said, you talking about a full-time coach? And he said, yes. And I said, I'll take it. I started my career with 147 attempts with no interceptions because I was at least smart enough to know the other guy, they took him out because he threw interceptions. Mm-hmm. So if you throw interceptions, you're probably out, is what I knew in my mind. Now, I still remember the first interception I threw was out here against Colorado. I can see it clear as day. I was trying to throw a curl route, and the backer came underneath it and inside and intercepted. I can see it in my head. As soon as I let go of the ball, I knew it. The ball, I couldn't grab it. I mean, the ball wasn't 10 feet out of my hands, and I saw what was getting ready to happen. And then when I came off the sideline, I jogged off the sideline. I knew it was a national record because it had already come out in the media. I think I broke the record even before the game. And I remember Coach Nutt was on the sidelines, and he was on the headphones to Coach Coker up in the box and Coach Shimmick up in the box. And Nutt said, come here. So I go over there to him, and he pulls his headphone off, and he said, Coach Shimmick is up in the box and said to make sure you know that we're wearing the orange and Colorado's wearing the white, and to throw the guys wearing the orange.
He said that during the game?
Well, right when I came off the field after my first interception. And so I didn't know if they were being funny or if they were upset at me. I didn't know. And
what were they?
They're just trying to calm me down, just like, hey, we're in orange, they're in white. Let's not throw to the guys in white. But anyway, long story short, that's how it all transpired.
Did you go through that process that you guys talk about as coaches of the game slowing down for players? Did you have that for you? Because you were thrown in the fire without reps, so I'd imagine the whole thing
the speed of the game.
Yeah.
So I played in what would be 8 games my freshman year because we didn't go to a bowl. Mm-hmm. Then mid-season, it was ironic because the first interception was Colorado. Mid-season of the next year, we played Colorado, and I remember it being like my 12th or 13th game of my career, and the game slowed down for me. I can remember it, and I can remember seeing things I didn't see. And it looked like, okay, now I get it. Now I understand. Now I see. I had gotten out of what would be almost like a panic stage, and the game slowed down from where I could really improve and get better. And it was against Colorado in what would have been 87 out here. That we played out here. Mm-hmm. And the game started to slow down. It's about game 13 or 14 in my career.
And you ended up leaving with a total offense record, and that record is actually set by Bob Fenimore in the 40s, so it stood for a long, long time. But you had people to distribute the ball to that were pretty good.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had great players. Mm-hmm. I mean, on that team, even my freshman year and sophomore year, we had Thurman Thomas, we had Barry Sanders, 2 NFL Hall of Famers, Hartley Dykes' first-round pick. We had Bobby Riley, we had J.R. Dillard, we had Garrett Limbrick, we had Kevin Simeon, we had Gerard Green, we had Curtis Mayfield at wideout. We had some guys, okay? If we would have run the style of offense we run now back then with those guys, we would have averaged, in 88, we'd average 52 points a game, which is unheard of. We would average 65 points a game with the skill set we had. But we just didn't play that kind of game.
So in your career, Coach, so you go 6-5 freshman year, 2 10-win seasons, and then your senior year, you were injured a little bit. I think probation had
we had probation.
Yeah.
The cloud of probation started in 87. Mm-hmm. Back then, the cloud of probation really, really affected your recruiting. So our 10-win year, and then the next 10-win year, they couldn't hardly sign anybody. Then they hammered us in June of prior to my senior year, and we couldn't go to bowls. They hammered us.
And the bowl ban was a big thing back then.
Big deal. So they had banned us from that and whatever. We were actually not bad at all. Gerald Hudson took the place of Barry, and Gerald led the nation in rushing, rushed for about 1,900 yards. and we were still a pretty good team, but we couldn't get through postseason. And
But you hurt a knee.
Yes, I did. Against Oklahoma, I tore my PCL in about middle of the third quarter, I think, toward the end of the third quarter. Tore my PCL, and I stayed in and played several plays after that. But when I would take off and scramble, I could feel my leg flopping, and I knew something wasn't right. And it was starting to get real thick feeling and heavy when it's filling up with blood because of the tear and then in the ligament. It was bleeding. So I kind of went off the field. I knew something was really wrong. So I went over there and they did that deal, and it's like, tore your PCL. So we bust back and of course meet with the doctors and all that and start draining my knee. It's full of blood. We drained it every day for about 3 or 4 days. They were trying to do treatments and stuff. We didn't have the technology we have nowadays. But you could play with a torn PCL if you wanted to. Can't play with an ACL. You have 2 ligaments in your knee, an ACL in the front and a PCL in the back, okay? And you could tear this PCL, like Thurman Thomas did that, and then braced it up, and he did it in the summer and strengthened his quad and played his last year. And I don't know if he ever got his repaired. I don't think he did, and mine's never been repaired. Back then, we didn't repair them. So during the week, the doctor said, you can't play. If you play, it might be later, but you can't play this week. So that was the first time in my life that I never practiced because I couldn't. And they drained that thing all week. And then we played Kansas State, which is Coach Snyder's first year here. And at halftime, they were ahead of us. We were behind.
I was an intern at K-State. I was here. Yeah, you came off the bench.
So I went in a big old, back then you had big brace. Mm-hmm. So I had a great big brace I was dressed and had a great big brace under my pads, my pants. And then it was all taped up and everything. I mean, it was bad looking because they braced me, but it was interesting. I wasn't going to play, but they braced me anyway. And luckily they did it because at halftime, Coach Jones said, "Can you play?" I said, "Sure, I can play. I mean, I can't run. My leg is stiff." And he said, I will put you in shotgun, and I just need you to get in and see if you can play and help us a little bit. I said, okay. So I'll never forget this. So I'm in shotgun. They're snapping me the ball, and I'm throwing it. So I'm just standing in the pocket. And I was an elusive player. One of the things I could do was scramble. And I could run, and they had a hard time. I was scared of getting hit, so they had a hard time catching me. So I ran all over the place back then. I'd make plays and so on and so forth. So I made 2 or 3 or 4 plays, and we were moving the ball. And we didn't signal plays back then. They'd run them in. The receiver would run a play and tell me, and I would tell them, break them out of the huddle. So I was doing okay, basically just kind of standing in the pocket throwing the ball. And then they ran one in, and they called for a speed option. Coker called an option. And I'm thinking, there's no way. I mean, because I literally could not bend my knee. And so a speed option is where everybody blocks down, and then I go at the last man on the line, and he takes me and I pitch it. But he doesn't have to take me. He can go to the back and make me run. And I don't remember who was playing in the end, but I'd like to find him someday and ask him why he just didn't take the back. But he did exactly what they had practiced in practice probably. And so fortunately they snapped it to me, and I remember taking a couple fast steps, and he kind of froze and I pitched it. All he had to do was do that, and I was history. But I laughed about that forever, and I've given Coker a hard time when I see him. You called an option. Anyway, we ended up winning the game. They fired a corner. We were on about the 12-yard line going in down here in the field in the corner, in the northwest corner. We were on the right hash. And back then, some defenses would fire a corner, blitz a corner, and that was a big deal back then, to blitz a corner. And I caught them blitzing, and the receiver adjusted, and I threw a sidearm around him blitzing, and he caught it and ran the end zone. And we ended up winning, I don't know, 16-12 or something in that game.
Was it during your kind of injury time when you started thinking about coaching, or was that already there?
You know, I didn't. After the Kansas State game, I think we had like maybe one more game or two. And because I thought I was going to play in the NFL. And
like every college player, by the way.
Yeah, and I had run up, I had good numbers. I mean, I was a good college player. I didn't have an NFL body, but I was a good college player. I was going to get a chance. I went to the combine, but my PCL wasn't fixed, so I couldn't run. I tried to run a 40 at the combine. I couldn't even finish it because my legs started doing this. But I did all the throwing there and so on and so forth. But I didn't perform very well because I had a torn PCL. Nowadays, they wouldn't have sent you.
Yeah. Like
your agent would have said, no, you're not going. You can't produce. Well, back then, I didn't know. I didn't have an agent. I got invited to the combine. I went to the combine. So when that was over, the combine used to be at the end of January. Because when that was over, I came home, and because I couldn't do much at the combine, I thought, I'm not gonna get a chance. If I get any chance at all, I'll be lucky to get a free agency based on I didn't do anything at the combine. And we were, I think, a week before signing day or something, I can't remember. And Larry Coker left here and took the coordinator job at OU. Houston Nutt went and took a job somewhere. And Brad Seeley left and went to the pros. All three of those guys were offensive coaches here for Coach Jones. They left. So he needed to fill a spot or two pretty quick for recruiting. We were getting a week away from signing day. So he gets in touch with me and asks me, would you like to coach? I hadn't even thought about coaching. Now, my major is education, where I was going to potentially teach and coach in high school. I mean, that was my major. But I still never really thought much about it. And he calls me and want to coach, and I said, well, I'm not sure if I want to. I thought he was talking about being a graduate assistant.
Which would have been a natural question.
Yeah. Because I didn't really want to go to college anymore. I said, well, I don't know if I want to go back to school for right now. And he goes, well, what are you going to go to school for? And I said, well, if you be a GA, you got to be in school. And he goes, no, I'm talking about hiring you as a full-time coach. I need a receivers coach. And I said, you talking about a full-time coach? And he said, yes. And I said, I'll take it. So the next day, I was up here and in the staff meetings with, back then, most coaches at this level were pretty older guys. Mm-hmm. Wasn't a lot of young coaches at this level, with guys who were sitting there smoking cigarettes, drinking coffee in the film room. I mean, the film room's full of haze from the smoke. About half the guys on your staff in those days smoked, including the head coach. So there it was, and I was coaching and coaching receivers. And
the guys that you had just
Jeff Bauer is the guy he hired for the coordinator. Mm-hmm. Was the Southern Miss coach forever. Mm-hmm. And coordinator at Southern Miss, came here to be a coordinator, went back to be the head coach and had great success. So he took quarterbacks and was the coordinator, and I coached the receivers.
And so you're coaching the guys you had just been throwing to. So the
guys I was drinking beer with 2 days ago. And then I was coaching them.
So that would be unheard of now, but it was pretty unheard of then, I would think.
And I don't know if I don't know who else has ever done it. I got lucky. And I think that Coach and I have had a great relationship forever. He's been very fond of me. And I really believe that, I've never asked him, but I came in and took over as a freshman. The next 2 years, we were a top 10 team in the country. We won 10 games both years, dominated everybody other than OU and Nebraska. Both of them were 1-2 in the country or 1-2-3, okay? We had Oklahoma beat, we had the pass, we had the drop, whatever. And I think he would just felt like he was going to be loyal to me for that, because we had 2 big time years now.
Yeah.
And probably 2 of the best years of his life as a head coach. So he gives me a start and, put me at a level that people work 10 years to get to. And I was just lucky enough to have enough sense to take advantage of it, and it worked out.
What did you learn? You were on an assistant at 3 different schools, OSU, Baylor, and Maryland.
That's correct.
With some really good coaches who lost a lot of games.
That's right.
What did you take out of that experience? Because you were in tough situations.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot. I coached 11 years before I was ever on a winning team. And back then, we came at 6 in the morning, went home at 11 o'clock at night, every day during the season. That's just the way it was. Because we didn't have technology, we didn't have computers, we couldn't just punch in and get what we needed. It was old tape. We were in at 6 and went home at 11 during the season. And it was 11 years, and we never had a winning season. So at some point, you start thinking, is this really worth it? Okay? And I was here for a few years during the probation, and we were back to back, and real below average recruiting classes because nobody would come here. So it was a tough time here. Then I left and went to Baylor and was on a staff with, I think, it's either 4 or 5 of us that were on that staff. We got fired. I got down there I went down there to spring ball at the end of March, then came back here to get Kristen because she was finishing up teaching, and we went back in May, and then we were fired in November. Baylor had a new AD and a new president and whatever, and we were fired in November. And I think there was 5 guys on that staff that ended up being head coaches. It was a really good staff. And then I went to Maryland and worked up there for Ron Vanderlinden, who's a really good, smart coach and could never get a break. I mean, just everything, when it got down to, we were close. We were close to getting in a bowl one year, and I don't know what happened. Somebody intercepted a pass, ran it in, and we were close with this and couldn't get over the hump. We never got over the hump. We had loaded up. We had 18 returning starters at Maryland, and we had a good quarterback coming back, Sean Hill. I went down to Parsons, Kansas, and he was playing JUCO ball, and found him, got him to sign at Maryland. Really good. Played 12, 13 years in the NFL. We had gotten him up there, and we had 18 returning starters. They fired us. Brought in Frigid. He won ACC championship the next year with all those guys.
Which is usually a sign of a staff that got that
go-to. And with
go
Sean Hill at quarterback.
Yeah. Usually when you have a rebound coach like that year one, it means that he was left a really, really good situation. That's not an X's and O's thing or a
we were loaded. And Coach Vandy never got to enjoy that. That's one of the things I regret. He busted his tail in recruiting, and we had recruited good players. And then we had Sean come in at quarterback and 18 guys, and they fired us. And the next year they won ACC. So when that happened, I learned a lot from Coach Vandy. I learned a lot from Coach Reedy at Baylor, and with Coach Simmons here and Coach Jones. And we weren't successful from a public's opinion because we had losing records. So I saw a lot of things that I thought we shouldn't do or I shouldn't do. And then I saw some things that we did. It just didn't work out. And I was smart enough to tell the difference between the two, not necessarily evaluate what the win-loss was, but try to gather what was best for the organization. Because you can be in our profession, you can be with good coaches and something bad happens or the wrong guys get hurt and you're not successful. And then those guys, Belichick's a pretty good coach. He wasn't good at Cleveland.
Right. Pete Carroll, look what he's done at certain time. I mean, Coach Saban, when he was at Miami, they were 3-14, and then he went to Alabama. So you can be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I was around some really good coaches that were in the wrong place at the wrong time. So then you get here and you have that first game, Montana State game. Was there a point you were like, well, I don't know if I know what I'm doing or not?
No, and I've said this before, I wasn't smart enough to know how hard it is. All I did was work and then try to stay with my core principles. Because first year we weren't successful, so everybody doubts you. Hired the golden child, the former player, blah, blah, blah. This guy can't coach his way out of a paper bag, so on and so forth. So the challenge then was, personally, is stay strong to your values and what you believe in. How did you get here? And what do you believe in? Don't budge. And I was smart enough to do that and not smart enough to realize it's really hard, especially to overcome a rough start. Then we were able to get a few good players, managed to get into that bowl game the second year and beat Alabama. I know they went through a coaching change, but still Alabama. It's a big deal for us to beat them, to get to the bowl and beat them. Then the next year we were able to accumulate some more talent, and we were pretty good. Even that third year, we were pretty good. And then once we got rolling, we were fortunate that we always had good quarterbacks, which is the key. We had guys that could make play at quarterback.
So I've asked you this before, but after win one, did you ever think you would get to 150?
Not here.
Right.
Because that hadn't happened here. I love this place, but I mean, you've been to the stadium we were in before Boone gave the $165 million. I mean, it was awful. Now, we didn't know that. People that grew up in the state, and when I was playing here, we didn't know that. We thought it was fine. But from a recruiting perspective, the outside didn't think much of it. So, and it had never happened at Oklahoma State. And the coaches that had come here that had done decent all left. Like when Coach Johnson was here, and obviously he's a good coach, but couldn't get what he wanted, so he left. Coach Miles was doing pretty good, started to kind of do good, and then he left. That had been a trend here. So I never ever envisioned coaching here for as long as I've been here now, 18 years, but I never envisioned not doing it. I just didn't know. I just kept doing what I do. I didn't pay close attention to it.
Would that be your thing that you're most proud of, is the fact a consistent winner at Oklahoma State, which had never been done over 2 decades?
It takes a lot to win here. It takes a lot of people to work together. And you know, I've said this a lot. Holder and I butted heads a lot, but we also did a lot of good things together. He was able to bring Boone in, which built this stadium. It would have been really hard to get where we are now without this stadium, because it was ugly. And recruiting became a big deal early in my career. We didn't have much to offer. So without him, without Boone, without us coming together and just finding our way through it, it would have been really, really difficult.
And he helped you retain coaches.
What's that?
And Coach Holder helped you retain a staff, which you've talked about.
Yes.
Yeah.
He did a good job of understanding consistency. And if we have good people, don't let them go. We don't have the same budget a lot of schools do, but he did a good job of coming up with a plan to say, he was the one that came up with multi-year contracts for assistants. That was him. Nobody else did that. I don't think Oklahoma did it for 10 more years. I think it's just recently, even Oklahoma, and I say that because we're all governed by the same state governed regions. I don't think they did it for 10 years after we did it. Coach had that idea, and that kept a lot of guys here. And we were able to build some consistency.